It all started on a Monday morning, the kind that felt longer than it should. Olivia Bennett walked into the glass building of Crestline Advertising Agency, balancing a steaming coffee in one hand and a laptop bag in the other. The city outside was still waking up, the sound of traffic mixing with the faint hum of rain against the pavement. She was new her first day as a senior content strategist, and though her smile was calm, her heart carried the quiet tension of someone stepping into a world she had long dreamed of. The open-plan office buzzed with chatter, ringing phones, and the rhythm of keyboards clicking in sync. She made her way past a row of desks until her manager, Caroline, introduced her to the team. "Everyone, this is Olivia Bennett. She's joining us from Seattle. Please make her feel at home." A few polite smiles followed, but one caught her attention more than the others. Across the desk, a man with tousled brown hair and an easy, confident presence looked up from his computer. Ryan Carter, senior art director, known across the office for his creativity and, as Olivia would later discover, his quiet kindness. He gave a small nod and said, "Welcome to the chaos." She laughed softly, replying, "I've survived worse." From that moment, something subtle but undeniable began, not fireworks, just the first spark of something real. Their first project together came a week later, a major client campaign with an impossible deadline. Olivia spent late nights drafting scripts and brand messages while Ryan stayed back designing visuals. The two often found themselves alone in the office when the rest of the team had gone home, the fluorescent lights flickering above and the sound of rain tapping against the windows. "You're still here?" he'd ask, leaning against her desk. "Someone has to make sure your designs have words to match," she'd reply with a smirk. They laughed easily, shared quiet dinners ordered from the late-night cafe across the street, and sometimes just sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Ryan began to notice things: how Olivia hummed when she was deep in thought, how she bit her lip when nervous, how her eyes softened when she talked about her little sister. Olivia noticed, too, the way Ryan always carried his camera everywhere, how he drew on napkins when stressed, how he'd listen before speaking. They weren't looking for love. They were just two people who fit unexpectedly between deadlines and caffeine. The first real shift came during a power outage. It was nearly midnight when the lights went out mid-presentation rehearsal. The office plunged into darkness, followed by a shared laugh that echoed through the empty space. Ryan turned on his phone flashlight, the glow falling across Olivia's face. For a long moment, neither spoke. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, could sense the electricity of proximity more than any artificial light. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, just didn't expect the universe to make it this obvious." He smiled, and though nothing happened, that night marked a beginning neither of them could deny. Days turned into weeks, and the unspoken bond between them deepened. They exchanged playlists, inside jokes, and quiet glances in crowded meetings. When a campaign they worked on together went viral, their success became the talk of the company. Caroline praised them as the dream team. What no one saw, however, was the growing ache of wanting something they weren't sure they could have. Office romances were tricky. Rules were unwritten but clear: professional lines, HR policies, the whispers that could ruin reputations. Olivia tried to convince herself that it was just friendship, that the way her pulse quickened every time Ryan brushed past her desk was just admiration. But then came the company retreat, 3 days at a lakeside cabin, meant to build teamwork and morale. The first evening, everyone gathered around a bonfire. Music played, laughter filled the air, and the scent of wood smoke mixed with the cool night breeze. Olivia sat slightly apart, gazing at the shimmering water, lost in thought. Ryan noticed and walked over, handing her a cup of coffee. "You don't like parties, do you?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I like people, just not too many of them at once." He chuckled. "Fair enough." They talked until the fire turned to embers, about work, childhood dreams, fears, and the strange comfort of finding someone who listened without judgment. When she shivered, he draped his jacket around her shoulders without hesitation. "You'll freeze," she murmured. "I'll live," he replied softly. And for a moment, under the canopy of stars, silence said what neither dared to speak. The next morning brought confusion wrapped in sunlight. They acted normal, exchanged smiles, worked through sessions, joked with colleagues, but something had shifted. That night, as the team celebrated another success, Olivia stepped out for air and found Ryan waiting near the dock. "You keep doing that," he said quietly. "What?" she asked. "Running away before I can say what I need to say." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "Then say it." He took a deep breath, eyes meeting hers. "I like you. More than I should. More than this job allows." For a moment, everything else disappeared, the company, the rules, the noise. Just two people caught between duty and desire. "Ryan," she began, but he cut her off gently. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." She stepped closer, whispering, "You shouldn't have said it." But her trembling voice betrayed her, and before either could think, he leaned forward and she didn't stop him. The kiss was soft, hesitant, yet full of everything they'd been holding back. When they pulled apart, reality hit hard. "We can't," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know," he said, voice low, "but tell me you didn't feel it." She didn't answer, she just turned and walked away, leaving him staring at the reflection of stars rippling across the lake. Back at the office, things grew complicated. They avoided being alone, spoke less, and threw themselves into work. Yet the silence between them screamed louder than words. Every glance across the meeting table, every shared file, every half-smile became a reminder of that night. Ryan tried to move on, dated briefly, laughed at jokes, pretended everything was fine. Olivia focused on her projects, stayed late, and avoided the break room where he used to wait with coffee. But love, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. One evening, after everyone had left, Ryan found her sitting in the dark conference room, head resting on her hands. "Still working?" he asked softly. She looked up, exhausted. "Trying to." He walked closer. "You don't have to do this alone. I do," she whispered. "Because if I don't keep busy, I'll think about you." He froze, his breath catching. "Then think about me," he said finally. "I'm right here." That night, they stopped pretending. They spent hours talking, really talking about everything they'd been afraid to say. He told her about the loneliness he carried despite his success, about losing his father young, about always feeling like he had to be perfect. She told him about her failed engagement years ago, how it made her afraid to trust anyone again. The walls they'd built came crashing down, replaced by the quiet understanding of two souls finding home in each other. But love in secret has its cost. Weeks later, Caroline called Olivia into her office. "You and Ryan have been close lately," she said carefully. Olivia's heart raced. "We work well together," she replied, trying to sound calm. Caroline nodded slowly. "You do. Just remember, office relationships can complicate things, especially when promotions are involved." That night, Olivia sat alone in her apartment, replaying those words. Promotion, complications, risk. Ryan knocked on her door an hour later, holding takeout. "Thought you might not have eaten." She smiled faintly and let him in. They ate in silence, the weight of unspoken fears pressing between them. Finally, she whispered, "What if they find out?" He looked at her gently. "Then we deal with it together." The story of their love didn't unfold in grand gestures, but in small, consistent acts: shared lunches, late-night edits, unspoken support during stressful campaigns. They became inseparable, both stronger and more vulnerable together. But as the company prepared for a major merger, rumors began to swirl. People noticed, whispers spread, and one morning, an anonymous complaint landed in HR. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The moment Olivia walked into the office, she could sense the shift in the air. Conversations paused when she passed, whispers followed, and glances lingered a little too long. It didn't take long before Ryan appeared at her desk, his expression guarded but calm. "We need to talk," he said quietly. They walked to the terrace overlooking the city skyline, where the noise of traffic muffled their tension. "Someone reported us," he said finally. Her stomach dropped. Reported? She echoed. To HR. About us. For a moment, time stopped. The world that had felt so alive, late nights, laughter, unspoken love suddenly seemed fragile. What happens now? She asked, her voice trembling. Ryan sighed, his jaw tight. They'll investigate. We'll probably be called in separately. But don't panic. We haven't broken any official rule. Olivia looked away, staring at the city lights flickering far below. But we have, Ryan. Maybe not on paper, but we both know what we've done. The following week was a blur of meetings and polite tension. HR sent formal emails requesting confidential discussions regarding workplace conduct. Olivia barely slept. She sat across from the HR manager, heart pounding as she answered carefully crafted questions. Have you engaged in any personal relationship with a colleague that could influence your work performance? The woman asked. Olivia hesitated, then said softly, no, it wasn't exactly a lie. Her work had never suffered. But as she walked out of the room, guilt pressed on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. Ryan's meeting came next. When he emerged, he gave Olivia a faint nod that said everything they were safe for now, but the cracks had begun. That evening, as the office emptied, Olivia stood by the large window overlooking the rain-soaked street. Ryan joined her quietly. They're not firing us, he said, voice low. But Caroline's been told to keep an eye. Olivia didn't turn to look at him. So we just pretend we're nothing? If it means keeping you here, then yes, he said. They tried. For weeks, they acted like colleagues again, professional, distant, polite. But the heart doesn't follow instructions. Their connection kept pulling them back together in ways they couldn't hide. Once, during a brainstorming session, their hands brushed accidentally, and she felt electricity run through her entire body. Another time, when Olivia got sick and missed work, Ryan showed up at her apartment unannounced with soup and a bouquet of wildflowers. You shouldn't have, she murmured, smiling weakly. Yeah, I really shouldn't have, he said, setting them down. But I couldn't stay away. That night, as she lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, he sat beside her watching some old black and white movie she loved. Between the glow of the screen and the sound of rain outside, their silence turned soft again. I missed this, she said quietly. You mean me, he teased. She smiled. Maybe. He leaned closer. You could just say yes. Her laughter melted into a whisper as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. The kiss that followed wasn't reckless, it was tender, honest, like coming home after a long journey. But love rarely stays hidden. 2 days later, Caroline called Ryan into her office. Her tone was sharp but concerned. You're one of the best creatives we have, Ryan, but I need to ask you something directly. Are you in a relationship with Olivia? He froze for a fraction of a second, then said, No, we're just friends. Caroline nodded slowly, unconvinced but unwilling to press further. Yet the damage was done. Rumors grew louder, and the quiet bubble they had built began to crack. One Friday evening, after another long week of tension, Olivia packed her things and headed for the elevator. Ryan caught up, breathless. Wait, he said, pressing the elevator button. I can't keep doing this pretending you don't mean everything to me. She turned to face him, eyes glistening. You think this is easy for me? Every time I see you, I have to act like we're strangers. The elevator doors opened, but neither moved. Then let's stop acting, he whispered. They ended up at his apartment that night, not in passion but in confession. Over takeout and soft music, they finally spoke every truth they had buried. She told him how scared she was to lose everything she had worked for. He told her how tired he was of hiding something so pure. When she started to cry, he took her hands gently. You've spent your whole life being careful, Olivia. Maybe it's time to be brave. And she was, for once, she chose love over fear. For a while, things felt right. They met discreetly, shared weekends away from the city, took long drives where no one knew them. They'd talk for hours about dreams, regrets, and the simple idea of one day not having to hide. Ryan's apartment became their safe place, filled with laughter, half-finished paintings, and the smell of her favorite coffee. On Sunday mornings, she'd sit by his window reading while he sketched her without her noticing. He told her she looked most beautiful when she didn't know he was looking. She told him he made her believe love could be gentle. But real life has a way of testing the strongest hearts. The agency's merger went through, bringing new management and new rules. The workload tripled, expectations rose, and tension seeped back in. Ryan was offered a creative director position, a major promotion that would make him Olivia's superior. The news hit her like a storm. She smiled in front of others, congratulated him sincerely, but inside she broke a little. That night, when they met at his apartment, she couldn't hold it in anymore. "This changes everything," she whispered. "You'll be my boss." He looked at her helplessly. "I didn't ask for it. I didn't even want it without you beside me. But it still happened," she said, her voice trembling. "And now if anyone finds out, it's not just gossip, it's a scandal." Ryan stood, pacing, frustration in his every move. "So what are you saying? That we just stop?" "I don't know," she cried. "I just know that if this comes out, it destroys both of us." The silence that followed was unbearable. He reached out, but she stepped back. "Maybe we need time," she said quietly. "To think, to breathe." He nodded slowly, pain flickering across his face. "If that's what you want." The days that followed felt hollow. The office was colder, quieter. She avoided his floor, he stopped staying late. Their messages grew fewer, their words shorter. Yet every time they passed each other in the hallway, 1,000 unsaid emotions filled the space between them. It was during one of those silent crossings that Ryan realized he couldn't do it anymore. That night, he wrote her a letter, not an email, not a text, but a handwritten letter sealed in an envelope left on her desk. It said, "Olivia, I know you think this is the right thing, but love doesn't vanish just because we're scared. I've spent my life designing beautiful things, but nothing has ever felt as real as you. If this job costs me you, then it's not worth keeping. Tell me where you'll be tonight, and if you still feel what I feel, I'll be there." She read it 3 times, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. That evening, she went to the old Riverside Cafe where they'd once worked late together. The lights glowed dimly. The same song from that night months ago played in the background. She sat by the window, waiting, uncertain if he would really come. But he did, breathless, eyes filled with both hope and fear. Neither spoke at first. Then Ryan said softly, "I meant what I wrote. I'll quit if it means being with you." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You can't do that," she whispered. "You've worked your whole life for this." He shook his head. "I worked my whole life for meaning, and I found it the moment I met you." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "Then we find another way, together." From that night, they stopped hiding. Ryan spoke to HR first, explaining everything honestly. Caused waves, but not the storm they feared. The company had seen office romances before. It was their integrity that saved them. Ryan stepped down from the promotion voluntarily, moving to a different creative branch. Olivia stayed, thriving in her role, admired for her honesty and talent. They built something real, not perfect, but true. Weekends were for coffee and long walks, weekdays for work and quiet messages only they understood. And when their anniversary came, Ryan surprised her with the simplest gift, a framed print of a quote he'd once scribbled in his sketchbook. "Love doesn't fit between deadlines. It rewrites them." Years later, when they married in a small garden surrounded by close friends, someone asked how they met. Olivia laughed softly, glancing at Ryan. "In the most unexpected place," she said. "Between deadlines and dreams." And as the sun dipped below the city skyline, they stood together, no longer hiding, no longer afraid, proof that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't found in fairy tales, but in the quiet corners of everyday life, where two people find courage between coffee cups and conference calls.